Quick question. When you ask an AI chatbot something like, "What's the capital of France?" and it says Paris, what just happened? Did it know that? Did it think about it? Or did it just guess really, really well? Stick with me for the next few minutes, because by the end of this, you're going to understand exactly what's happening inside these systems. No computer science degree required. And the answer is way weirder and way more interesting than yes or no. Let's start with something you already understand. Your phone's keyboard. You type, "I can't wait to see you," and your phone suggests tonight or tomorrow as the next word. It's not thinking about your relationship. It's not excited for your date. It's just noticed that across millions of text messages, those words tend to follow that phrase. Now here's the twist that changes everything. Modern AI, the ChatGPTs, the Claudes, the Geminis of the world, are, at their core, doing the same basic trick, predicting the next word, over and over and over again. That's it. That's the secret. One word at a time, guessing what comes next. Now I can already hear you thinking, wait, that's it? That doesn't sound like thinking at all. That sounds like a glorified guessing machine. And you're not wrong. But hold that thought, because something strange happens when you scale that simple trick up to an almost unimaginable size. Here's the thing about that next word guessing game. It turns out that to get really good at it, you can't just memorize common phrases. You actually have to develop something deeper. Think about it this way. Imagine I gave you a book with the first 10,000 words of a mystery novel, and I said, predict the next word over and over until you finish the book. At first, you might just guess based on grammar. After the, maybe a noun comes next. Easy. But to get really good at this game, to correctly guess plot twists, character reactions, and clever dialogue, you'd eventually need to actually understand the story. Who the characters are, what they want, what clues have been dropped, what kind of person the author is, and how they write. In other words, the only way to get really good at predicting what comes next is to build an internal model of how the world works. And that's exactly what happens with AI, except instead of one book, it's trained on a huge slice of the internet. Articles, books, conversations, code, Wikipedia pages, forum posts, an enormous, almost incomprehensible mountain of human writing. To get good at predicting the next word across all of that, the system doesn't just memorize sentences. It starts building internal patterns for things like how math works, how arguments are structured, how characters and stories behave, how code executes, how sarcasm sounds different from sincerity. So when someone asks, is AI thinking or guessing? The honest answer is, it's guessing. But the guessing got so sophisticated that it started to look a whole lot like thinking. Here's where it gets philosophically spicy, so let's slow down. What do you do when you think? Say someone asks you, what's 47 plus 38? You don't have a memorized answer sitting there. Your brain does something, breaks the numbers apart, carries the one, arrives at 85. Is that fundamentally different from what's happening inside an AI? Honestly, we don't fully know. And that's not a cop-out. That's the actual, honest, current scientific answer. Neuroscientists still don't completely agree on what thinking is inside a human brain, let alone whether something similar is happening inside a computer. But here's a useful way to think about it. There seem to be two very different modes going on inside these AI systems, and both are true at the same time. Mode 1, pattern matching. If you ask, what's the capital of France, the model doesn't reason its way there. It has seen the phrase, capital of France, followed by Paris so many times, across so many documents, that the connection is basically baked in, like a reflex. That part really is closer to guessing, an extremely educated, extremely confident guess, but a guess based on statistics. Mode 2, something that looks a lot more like reasoning. Ask it a brand new logic puzzle it's never seen before, something you just made up on the spot, and it can often work through the steps, one at a time, and land on a correct answer. That's not a memorized reflex because the exact puzzle never existed before you typed it. Something more like actual problem solving is happening. So which is it? Honestly, both. Constantly. Switching back and forth, sometimes within the same sentence. And that mix is exactly why this question is so hard to answer with a simple yes or no. Let's talk about where this all falls apart a little, because it's genuinely revealing. You've probably heard about AI hallucinating, confidently stating something completely false, like dead wrong, made-up book titles, fake court cases wrong. Here's why that happens, and it actually tells us a lot about the thinking versus guessing question. Remember, at its core, the system is still playing that word prediction game. It's trying to produce the most plausible-sounding next words, not necessarily the most true ones. Most of the time, plausible and true line up nicely, because the truth tends to be the most common pattern in its training data. But sometimes, especially on obscure facts, or very specific details, or made-up sounding questions, the model will produce something that sounds exactly like a correct answer, in the right tone, right structure, right confidence, and it's just completely fabricated. Think about a student who didn't study for the exam but is really good at sounding confident. They don't know the answer, but they know what a good answer is supposed to sound like. So they write something plausible, in the right voice, using the right vocabulary, and hope it lands. That's a genuinely useful way to picture what's happening when AI hallucinates. It's not lying, exactly, because lying requires knowing the truth and choosing to say something else. It's more like confidently improvising in a style that resembles truth. And that single fact, that AI can be completely wrong while sounding completely certain, is maybe the single best piece of evidence that whatever is happening in there isn't quite human thinking. Because a person who truly understands something usually has some sense of how sure they are. These systems, left to their own devices, often don't. Okay, so if it's just predicting words, why does it sometimes feel like you're talking to something genuinely intelligent? Why can it write poetry, debug your code, explain a breakup, or come up with a joke that actually lands? Here's an analogy that might help. Think about a flock of birds, a murmuration, swooping and swirling in these incredible shapes across the sky. No single bird is directing the group. No bird has a plan for the overall shape. Each bird is just following 3 simple rules. Stay close to your neighbors, match their speed, don't crash into anyone. But zoom out, and you see something that looks unmistakably like intelligent, coordinated behavior, a shape-shifting cloud that seems to have a mind of its own. AI is a bit like that, except instead of birds following 3 simple rules, you have billions of tiny mathematical connections, each doing something almost embarrassingly simple, adjusting a number slightly based on other numbers. No single connection understands language or logic or humor, but zoom out across billions of them working together, and something emerges that can hold a conversation, write a sonnet, and help you plan a birthday party. That's called an emergent behavior, where something complex arises from many simple parts, without any single part actually containing the complexity itself. Your own brain is arguably the same story. A single brain cell doesn't know it's part of something conscious, but 86 billion of them together, wired up a certain way? Apparently that adds up to you. So maybe the fairest way to describe what AI does isn't thinking in the human sense, and it isn't randomly guessing either. It's something new. A third category we didn't really have a word for until recently. This isn't just a fun philosophical thought experiment. It actually changes how you should use these tools day to day. If you treat AI like it's definitely thinking, like a human expert who understands what they're saying, you'll trust it too much. You'll take that confidently stated fact at face value and get burned when it turns out to be a beautifully worded piece of nonsense. But if you treat it like it's only guessing, like a fancy magic 8-ball, you'll undersell what it can actually do. You'll miss out on genuinely useful help with real reasoning, real problem solving, real creative collaboration. The truth, as usual, lives in the messy middle. The best way to use these tools is to treat them like a brilliant, well-read intern who's read basically everything ever published, has genuinely useful insight and reasoning ability, but who will also, on occasion, very confidently tell you something completely made up, with a totally straight face. Useful? Absolutely. Trustworthy without double-checking? Not quite. So, back to our original question. Is AI thinking, or is it guessing? Here's the most honest answer we can give. It's guessing, using patterns learned from an almost unimaginable amount of human writing, and that guessing has become so sophisticated, so layered, so structured, that it produces behavior which genuinely resembles thought. without us being totally sure it's the same kind of thing happening inside a human skull. Maybe the more interesting question isn't, is it really thinking? Maybe it's, does it matter if the outcome is useful? As long as we remember it's not human, and it can be wrong, and it needs a second pair of eyes? Because at the end of the day, whether you call it thinking, guessing, or something entirely new, we haven't invented a word for yet. The smartest move is the same one it's always been. Stay curious, stay a little skeptical, and never stop asking, wait, is that actually true? Don't forget to subscribe for more thoughtful videos like this one.